Hey everyone, this is going to be a presentation on the religion of evolutionary psychology. It is a topic that I picked simply because this was the only topic that was left to be picked. By no means am I an expert in this area, but here is my attempt to try to explain what it is and how it is seen as a religion in today's society. So, as we look at evolutionary psychology, first, let me just give you a short definition of what evolutionary psychology is. So, evolutionary psychology is one of many biologically informed approaches to the study of human behavior. Along with cognitive psychologists, evolutionary psychologists propose that much, if not all, of our behavior can be explained by appeal to internal psychological mechanisms. So basically, this is very similar and very parallel to the idea of evolution in general, or Darwin type of evolution, the survival of the fittest, where if there is an understanding that the human body has evolved over the ages, and if the human body has evolved over the ages, so has the human brain evolved over the ages. So the mind has been evolving, the brain has been evolving, and it has been pressuring us to survive and to reproduce. So basically, the way we think changes, and our mind in that way also changes how we act, and it changes our behavior. So if, let's say, back in the days, and basically one of the biggest areas where evolutionary psychology is seen, or where it is shown, is in the area of sexuality. So if historically, years ago, you would be getting into a romantic relationship with someone primarily because of their ability to reproduce, or because of your plans to reproduce and to have offspring, and losing that partnership would jeopardize your future. Today, that is not the case. Today, that is more of a choice version. So today, you do not choose your sexual partner simply in order to reproduce. Today, there are other reasons for that. So that shows that we have evolved over time from being a certain type of beings sexually to a different type of beings today. So our behavior is naturally selected just as our physical traits are. And so through the generations, evolution has helped us pass along adaptive behaviors. So as I mentioned already, that this thinking is seen in the way that the gender roles have been changing and evolving, and how we view the differences between male and female genders, and how do we even define genders? Is it defined biologically, or is it defined psychologically? And I think that's one of the biggest ways that we see the religion of evolutionary psychology being expressed in the way that that the society today is showing us what defines gender. Gender is not defined biologically. Gender is defined by how we view certain things. So let me just give you a quote by an individual named Glenn Geher, who wrote the book called Evolutionary Psychology 101. So I guess this guy knows what he's talking about, but here's an excerpt from that book. So he says, in many evolved psychological processes, mate preferences are largely unconscious, and they evolved largely because they were predictive of outcomes associated with reproductive success. So once again, we're going back to that old ways of preferring a mate or a relationship because of a potential in the reproductive success. So here his quote continues. on average, men who had preference for women with relatively youthful features were more likely to mate with such women. Such women were, on average, more likely to be able to conceive. And men with such preferences, therefore, were more likely than men with alternative preferences, that is, men with preferences for women with wrinkled skin. The initial men with preferences of younger women were more likely to be successfully reproduce. So basically, this explains again the behavior and mate preferences historically. There was a need to reproduce, there was a need to have more children, and because of that, men were seeking specific types of women to have success in that area. And what's interesting, I think today, that is not the case today, and that is what how we see evolutionary psychology being an alternative to the whole idea of the scripture, saying, God created men and God created women, and that is two different genders, right? But I think today we don't have that need for successful reproduction through mating, right? We have psychologically evolved, so we don't have to pick our mates in order to survive or reproduce. We can survive in other ways, without having to have offspring. We can reproduce without having a man, right? We can implant the egg and the sperm, right? We can implant the sperm, and women can reproduce that way. So because there are these other ways of reproduction, men preferring women is an outdated behavior of our ancestors. And now, because we have psychologically evolved, we can date whomever we want, we can sleep with whomever we want, because the reason for our relationships is not the outdated reason of reproduction, but the reason for that is for our enjoyment and for having and for being in a relationship that fits our thoughts better, right? So as a result of this, there's actually something that's called evolutionary mismatch that happens, and we find ourselves in an environment inconsistent with our ancestral conditioning. So I think we can see that evolutionary psychology basically says, look, we can make the world a better place to live through human psychology, through our thinking process, and if we change our thinking process, our behavior will change. The way we deal with stress is through our thoughts. The way we view relationships is through our psychological perspective. And so reading, making friends, gaining trust are all skills that are rooted in deeply complex neural circuits. And the more we think about it, the more we use our brain and not our feelings, not our hearts, and not believe into some type of a religion, the more we trust our brain and what our brain tells us, that's how we should live, and that's what's going to make our world a better place.